Come on and get in. Hey there, welcome to Michael on the Go, Catholic Family Man Edition, and I am your host, Michael Giannotti. The Cosmos, part 2 of 3, Science and Philosophy, where lines may sometimes blur. So yesterday in the last video we talked about popularist science and how that's an important thing. It gets people excited about science, takes things that are very complex and distills it down for dissemination to the masses. You know, I talked about how I loved it. I mean, I've been reading popularist science since I was a kid, when I used to get Popular Science, right, the magazine. And we've seen a number of scientists who've done a great job in making science accessible to everyone. And that's a great thing. But sometimes, you know, I mentioned that, you know, we need to look behind what's been distilled down into the deeper, more complex things that are actually going on. Look behind something that we may be excited to find out the overarching full truth behind it. You know, a favorite saying of deGrasse Tyson, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to get it wrong, but you know, he said this a lot on talk shows, is the great thing about science is it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, it's a fact. But the fact of the matter is, not all things presented as science, especially when we're talking popularist science, are necessarily scientific fact. Point in case that they bring up in the series itself, again, right off the bat, and something that when you look behind the scenes should trigger some things. So deGrasse Tyson talks about real quickly, he mentions the multiverse in the, you know, in the opening of Cosmos, and he says there are many scientists who believe in a multiverse of multiple universes, etc., etc. And that is a very interesting idea that a number of scientists do adhere to and have postulated, but it's not so simple as that. The reason is, whenever you hear in series like this or any popular science, things like the multiverse, brain theory, brain collision, M theory, multiple big bangs, there should be a trigger that goes off that says, you know, not Danger Will Robinson, but hey, let's look behind where this comes from, because most of it originates from something called string theory, which is a very popular with certain segments in the scientific community area of research and thought that really has gone beyond just what's typically thought of as science and is more atypical to mathematics. So what I'd like to do is kind of just to set the table, because you're going to see this idea of string theory and the outcomes or the proposed outcomes of string theory throughout the series, and you need to understand where it comes from, the history behind it, and how it really is an area of controversy in the scientific community, and not just readily accept it, but use your own, again, use what deGrasse Tyson says, keep an open mind and question everything, go behind what's presented in the series. So string theory is something that's been around for quite a while, and in a nutshell, what string theory is, it originates back, starting back with Einstein, really, and then getting firmly rooted in the 60s. But where it originates is this. Back when Einstein was looking at, you know, astrophysics and talking about the theory of relativity and, you know, gravitational wells or sinks, etc., and this whole field of quantum physics was originating, you had two competing areas of physics that came about. One in quantum that looked at the microcosm, things at an atomic and subatomic level, and coming up with theories and laws of physics in quantum physics that were very accurate in predicting and being able to, you know, not only predict but test and verify certain laws that would take place at a quantum level. Then in astrophysics, you had things at a macro level that did the same thing, you know, with Einstein and others. The problem was, and the problem is, that in many areas the laws of quantum physics and the laws of astrophysics seemingly are in conflict with one another. Things that, you know, dictate how things should occur at a macro level break down those laws when you go to the micro level, and conversely the same thing happens. So you have these two areas, and so scientists, starting with Einstein, start saying, you know, Einstein actually wanted this unified theory of everything, something that would explain and bridge between the two. He got so frustrated, he finally gave up. Said you can't find it today, you know, maybe someday. So in the 60s, this idea of string theory originated. And string theory says, you know, bringing it down, kind of distilling it simplistically, but string theory in essence says at a microcosmic level there are these things that they call string. Now it's not real string, but it's basically energy that vibrates at these lengths of energy vibrating at certain wavelengths, and that the vibrations are what bring about and constitute the physical universe as we know it. And, you know, varying depending upon the vibrations, etc., it'll affect the physical properties and the laws of physics governing them, etc., that, you know, that we can observe and test, etc. But the problem with that is that string, this proposed idea of string, it's purely a mathematical concept. The scientists that came up with that worked out these mathematical formulas to come up with this idea of string, and it takes place in their mathematical formulas at such an infinitesimal, such a small microcosmic level that it cannot be tested or verified. It can't be observed. So for example, when we talk about a string, it's not just at the level of an atom, it's not at the level of the components of an atom, protons, electrons, and neutrons. It's predicted mathematically at a level that is 10 to the negative 20th power of the size of a proton. In other words, it's infinitesimally smaller than a proton. So there's no way to measure it, no way to test or verify any of that other than mathematical constructs. However, based upon those mathematical constructs, there are certain predicted outcomes of string theory. Excuse me. But those have changed over the years. Why have they changed? Because when they have looked at the predictable external outcomes, when there have been tests that have been able to originate over the years as our ability to observe, to measure, to predict, and to create conditions to look at them, like, you know, particle accelerators, they have not proven, it hasn't shown itself. In fact, the models have broken down. So as the model has broken down each time, they then come up with additional models that correct the one mathematical model, and then those predict additional things. So for example, when we talk about the multiverse, that is a construct that, in order for the original elegant solution of string theory to work, when they showed it broke down, they had to then come up with this idea, well, there's multiverses, and then they mathematically worked that out, and then that corrected, but of course we cannot observe these multiverses. When some of those things broke down, they then said it's not just a Big Bang, but it has to be multiple Big Bangs. And while we have had testing that's verified and in fact pointed to the original Big Bang theory as proposed by a Jesuit priest many years ago, that, you know, they proposed and said, well, it's really not just a Big Bang, there's many Big Bangs with no uncaused cause, because that's what we're mathematically coming up with. But meanwhile, none of the models are anything more than mathematical, and that's really resulted in two conflicting areas of scientific thought. We have traditional scientists who say, like deGrasse Tyson likes to say, the great thing about science is it's facts, you know, and whether you believe it or not, it's still a fact. Well, That adheres to traditional empirical science, where you can test, verify, and come up with facts, right, that you can point to and prove. But when we talk about areas like string theory, the multiverse, M theory, brain theory, brain collisions, and multiple Big Bangs, we're in a whole other area that has no basis in empirical science, but purely in abstract mathematical thought. And there are scientists like Dawkins, Hawking's, and other that they like to adhere to that, because then they're no longer bound by empirical fact and empirical science. And so we really cross the boundaries. And so there's a lot of controversy around that. In fact, Nova and PBS, you know, Nova, who's done things, produced the Elegant Universe, where all about string theory and all this, these areas of thoughts by Dr. Brian Greene, actually points out and says on its own site that, you know, when you've crossed that boundary, it's in essence become philosophy and not science as traditionally understood. So that's really this big area of controversy. And it's important to note, when you watch something like the Cosmos, where it's popular as science, great to get people excited. Oftentimes, when those things are presented, they're presented as scientific fact, when in fact, they're not. They've crossed and get into that blurry line crossing between science to philosophy, mathematical constructs that cannot be empirically tested, verified, proven, or disproven. And so that gets into a very shady area that many scientists are uncomfortable with. You know, I can go on and on about that. I'm going to provide some links because, like DeGrasse Tyson says in the opening, hey, keep an open mind, question everything. You should look behind it as well. So I'll provide links both pro and con that you can start to read and look at the evidence both for and against these things, because they are areas of controversy. And in fact, over the years, the last number of years, while big money has funded it, I mean, string theory and the stuff around that are exciting. It's exciting to think about all the multiverse, and a lot of scientists love to jump on that bandwagon. But increasingly, in fact, the scales have kind of tipped over the last number of years. More scientists, you know, again, you can read about it, more scientists have gone to the other end saying, you know what, this is not science at all, that it may be worthy of scientific inquiry and endeavors, but at this point in time, it's really mathematical philosophy and not science proper. And so again, there's those divergent areas of thought. I'll let you check out. You can weigh and look at the evidence both for and against and check it for yourself. But question, so some of the things in Cosmos, is it science or is it opinion and philosophy? You be the judge, look behind the scenes, and check it out for yourself. In the next episode of our 3-part series, we're going to take a look at the Catholic Church. Is it for science or against science, as brought up in the series. And until then, this is Michael Giannotti, Catholic Family Man edition of Michael on the Go. But you have a great day. Keep an open mind. Question. God bless and peace.